Hello everyone and welcome once again to the vast and ominous comic book vault. It's time for new acquisitions. I'm Captain Logan.
And I'm Dan.
Hi Dan, are you ready to review some comics?
I think so. Looks like a pretty good week this week.
Yes, it's going to be great. This is going to be a weird week in that Dan and I, it's another one of those lopsided weeks where Dan and I have just 3 books to review together, and then you're going to see us go back and forth a whole bunch with some singles. So,
This will be an onslaught.
this will be fun, yeah, but not that onslaught.
I wish Red Skull Onslaught was back. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, I hope that happens soon, actually, because that's really interesting. As always, I want to say thanks to Elite Comics out here in Overland Park, Kansas. Thanks for helping us out with the show. And now we're going to start right away, Dan, with our Marvel books, and it begins with Hunger, #1. And I think "it begins" is the exact right sentiment for this for this issue. Of course, I don't know if excited was the right word, but clearly I was going to get this and review it because it's Galactus, and I collect Galactus, I love Galactus, it's fun. I was on the fence about how I felt about doing Galactus and Ultimate just because I never really loved the idea of doing a lot of crossover with Ultimate. I always liked the original idea that we weren't going to do a lot of that and they were going to be 2 very separate universes. There's precedent, of course, for it now with Spider-Man. If it had to be done again this soon, and if that was what the last big event, Age of Ultron, was going to all kind of be about, what better way to do it but just have real Galactus show up in the Ultimate Universe?
Yeah, because real Galactus is, like, so much cooler than Ultimate Galactus, because Ultimate Galactus is just Galactus from the second Fantastic Four movie, and that's
Galactus. Well, actually, Galactus from Galactus is actually way better than the one in the Fantastic Four movie, only because it's a swarm, and it's
a swarm of, like, machines. It's not like a storm cloud like it's in the movie.
It's a collective.
It looks sort of the same.
It's a collective consciousness.
The silhouette of the hat in the cloud. That's what I was thinking of.
Yeah, there's that, but what's kind of fun about them in this because I've never really looked at a lot of that stuff. I knew about it. I think I own some of it, and I just haven't sat in and read it.
Nice.
But what I dug about them here is that the little machines flying around all have the Galactus thing points.
Yeah, they're all
around
designed
them.
like his helmet. That is cool.
That was cool. Dan, I had a great time with this one. What did you think?
I thought it was pretty cool. I like that Rick Jones is our sort of window into this world and this big cataclysmic event, because I like Rick Jones a lot, even though I'm not too familiar with the Ultimate version of him.
Yeah.
I like the character quite a bit, knowing him from Hulk and Avengers and Captain America and stuff like that, so that was cool to see. But I like where this is going. It's mostly a plot setup kind of issues, showing how the Ultimate Universe, how that side reacts to Galactus is coming into their universe and the sort of space internal war politics that he enters into with the Chitauri and the Kree. So we get a little bit of, insight into what's going on with that stuff. I don't know if there's any pre-existing conflict or precedent for that sort of stuff in the Ultimate Universe already. I know things from 616 Marvel that are similar, but I'm not sure. I haven't read a ton of that stuff. So I'm interested to see where it's going, really. But, I had a good time with it. It was fun having Rick Jones talk to himself. The Watcher was possessing. That was a fun dynamic.
Yeah, it was fun. If the Watcher can't possess other people around it because there's nobody else around him, he just possesses Rick Jones and makes him talk to himself. That's fun. Yeah, this is a good approach if you find yourself locked, for whatever reason, into having to do just a straight up plot setup issue like you said. And could more actual story have been told here, gotten Galactus in earlier, and then actually started getting into it a little bit? Possibly, maybe, but if you have to do it this way, I appreciate that the comedy kind of got us through this. I didn't expect this to be a funny book.
True.
And I don't think that the humor overpowers it to the point where it can't also get serious. I really enjoy the idea of Rick Jones like going against the Watcher and in order to go get a hamburger. I thought that was kind of fun.
Yeah, it reminded me of sort of like Bendis-esque dialogue where it's really snappy and it can get serious if it needs to, but there's always that sort of sarcastic, humorous tone to it a lot of the time when he's having the characters bounce off of each other. And I found that to be really fun. I'm with you. I think Fialkov has a great voice for the characters he was writing here. And this gives a little bit more credence to it. I think that maybe we're going to merge Ultimate and 616 at the end of the day, because
I think so too.
The Chitauri, the big race from the Avengers movie, is in this. And I would not be surprised if they're somehow integrated into 616. If they haven't been already, I've heard some things about them maybe being in the Nova book already that Globe and McGinnis were doing. So I don't know. We shall see, I suppose.
And I also just think it's fun that Galactus can just rip right through a hole in time and space and walk out
cool.
of it. I've never seen that. He's just like, and I'm coming through. You know, like I just ripped through my own wall or something. That was cool. So yeah, I'm looking forward to this. This is gonna be fun. Let's move on now to What If AVX number 3. And so from last issue, we weren't able to really talk too much about this. The big cliffhanger last issue is, guess what? Hope actually gets possessed by the Phoenix, and that's kind of the big what if thing here. It's the big, huge, giant difference, besides all the Magneto stuff, is guess what? She actually does get possessed right away, and how would that change all the you know, where everything went and change the events of this. I enjoyed this a lot. I have one huge question right away, and that was, it seemed a little bit strange to me that the Phoenix here, Hope Summers, does kind of the same thing the Phoenix in X3 does, which is, I'm going to work with Magneto because, I don't know, he's Magneto.
That's very true. I didn't even think of that.
There's a little bit of this, there's this weird thing where, I mean, I can sort of see how their interests line up a little bit, where it's like, you know, she cares about mutants, and he cares about mutants, and she's totally cool getting rid of all the humans if that's what it takes. He's more quick to go to that than she is, of course, and he's got the same motivation he does in the movies at the end of X2, really. But what was weird about it was it's just this little plot inconsistency where she has this moment where she says, I need to be alone. And I thought everyone was gonna leave, but then Magneto just stays there, and she's totally cool with it. She's like, I need to be by myself, and she forces all the humans back to Earth. But then Magneto's just still there, and she's totally cool with it. And I just thought that was a little bit strange. So yeah. Anyway, what did you think of this one?
I think one of the points you made about her wanting to be alone and Magneto still being there is sort of apt with one of the larger things that I have with this book as we're going on. I think I noticed this a little bit more in this issue just because it's been going on for 3 issues now, but I feel like this is he has the characters having a lot of exposition that doesn't he does a good job of making it feel natural most of the time, but when you read a lot of the dialogue here, most of the stuff is just him trying to get to beats that he wants to get to in 4 issues because he's trying to condense a 12-issue story into 4.
That's exactly right.
So a lot of the characters like Cyclops here don't have a lot to do, and he was such a main character in the main book. I want to see, especially with Cyclops, what he's doing in this alternate take, but here he's just sort of saying things to move the plot forward and nothing else. So that was something that I didn't really care for too much in the series as a whole, but that's what I noticed going into this one. And one of the things I did like, though, was that they did explain the Emma Frost thing that I had sort of questions at the end of the 2nd issue, where it was like she kind of flipped a little too quickly for me, but we get an explanation as to why that happened here, and I like where they went with it. That was good. So
it's still fun. You know,
it's very fun.
You know, you complained.
Did you notice the art difference? What did you think of the new artist on this?
I liked it less than last issue.
I did too, just because I don't think it fits the tone at all.
No, it really doesn't.
I just don't think it works well with the material. It's a little too cartoony for my taste and over the top.
Is it Ramos that was doing the art on Amazing Spider-Man that you and I were never a big fan of? It reminds me of that guy.
I agree. Yes.
Especially there's this panel where Wolverine kind of hacks up water, and that was just really Ramos to me.
Yeah,
you know what I'm talking about? I just thought that was where he's just like, it's really over the top. It's really...
It almost looks like if you were to combine Ed McGuinness and Ramos, where like Ed McGuinness draws really expressive faces, but everyone's really big and burly and looks like an action figure on steroids, you know?
And then here the faces are all cartoony.
Goofiness and playfulness with Ramos's art. So yeah, I agree with you.
It's too exaggerated for my taste, and it's too inconsistent because some you know, go back and looking at it here, some of the panels look great, and then other times it's way too cartoony, like the big you know, there's a 2-page spread here with Magneto and Phoenix and Emma Frost that I think looks okay. And then at the end, the big panel with the last page I think looks great. I'm fine with that.
Yeah, it does. It does.
So, it's weird.
Except for Wolverine down there, I think he looks a little Rob Liefeld, Captain America-esque.
No. Well, we can't even show this because it's the last page. But
he is just big and...
Oh, you're right! I didn't even notice that. Okay.
Wider than his head.
Yeah. Wow, that is kind of goofy.
Yeah, but other than that, yeah.
There were even a couple characters here and there that I thought looked surprisingly like their counterparts in X-Men Evolution.
Yeah, you're right. I think the characters in general in here look a little bit younger than they should be, just because the art is a little bit more manga-esque, like Ramos's art.
I think if the entire thing had been done that way, it would be jarring and I wouldn't like it, but at least I'd be used to it by now. Even you know, three out of 4 issues, I wasn't ready for that. It does, you know.
Right, especially since the artist that was on this before was a little bit, not grittier, but it was a little bit more cross-hatching, a little bit more of that 90s Rob Liefeld-esque kind of art. Not the same stylistic looking sort of thing, but in that vein, stylistically at least. The way it's drawn, I suppose, the craft. But yeah, I'm still enjoying this. I hope it ends in an interesting place anyway.
Yeah, I'm sure it will. I bet you money a major character gets killed off. Because
well, I mean, we had that here. It seems like we're getting at least a couple major character deaths every issue, where we had a major member of the Avengers and then an entire Marvel Universe team get killed off.
Real quick, you know what I found startling? Just because I've gotten so used to current status quo, Professor X shows up, and I was like, wait a minute, and then I was like, oh yeah, what am I reading?
It was like that all-new X-Men issue where you're like, oh my god, he's back.
But here it wasn't a dream, it wasn't the danger room, it was an alternate reality, but we already knew that. Let's go ahead and move on now to... Let's go ahead and move on to more X-Men and Avengers at the same time with Uncanny Avengers number 10. This was a lot of fun. What's really enjoyable about this is getting to see who the new Horsemen are, and they're starting to pop up, and we're getting to see who they are. And I just watched and wrote a review for First Class, so seeing Banshee in this was kind of jarring for me, or not, jarring is not the right word, but it was just it was out of left field. It started. I was like, oh yeah, I forgot Banshee. That's cool. So anyway, yeah, this was fun. Go ahead, Dan. What'd you think of this?
I am just so impressed that Remender has been able to get the plot of this book so involved and so out there and so wacky and so sci-fi, and still keep it so grounded in real-world human politics and human relationships, and kept that aspect of the book such a strong focus in this. And that's one of his great talents, I think, and that's why he's such a great writer for this sort of material, the superhero stuff. I am just really impressed with all the interpersonal relationships that he's able to have here, and all the, it's sort of like Bendis, where all these characters have connections because I haven't necessarily read all of them before. I'm discovering the relationships they have with each other and how well they play off of each other, especially with Havoc and Wanda in this issue. Those are two characters that I didn't really know had any sort of relationship. I really like Wanda, but I'm not too familiar with Alex Summers, so it was cool to see them in their perspectives on the world really sort of play off of each other.
Something that I keep finding, and I don't want to be too broad, I know this isn't probably wholly true with everybody,
Sure.
Something I've been finding with all the X-Men stuff in Marvel now is I have just what you had, just what you said you have, I've been enjoying a lot of this because of all the stuff I get to learn that I didn't know before. And I feel like from the not right now, but from the beginning of all this Marvel Now stuff, it was a fantastic jumping on point. You didn't have to know anything about X-Men to be completely sucked up into this world. And, or at least, I'm sure that what I knew about X-Men was helpful, but at least you didn't have to know a lot about more recent things. You didn't have to know every single relationship and all the ins and outs, because this gives you a lot of that, and a whole lot of characters are being brought back that haven't been used for anything in a really long time, or for much of anything in a long time.
Especially characters like Sunfire.
Sunfire, yeah.
I hadn't seen him, I mean, I've read the Claremont stuff that he's in from the 70s, but I can't remember the last time I saw that guy.
And also Avengers is that way too. When was the last time that Wonder Man was really that big of a deal?
Yeah, very true.
So I think that I may be enjoying this more than some big X-Men fans, because I get to learn all of that stuff, because Bendis and Remender both are so good at giving us those things.
Yeah, it's amazing that they're able to keep this so accessible but throw so much at you at the same time.
I think
it's really impressive.
I think that we can't talk about this book without talking about all of the interesting things that are done with the fact that we've got Avengers and X-Men trying to work together, but also in a lot of cases not being able to. This is such a great place to explore the pros and cons of pacifism, and we've been dealing with that a little bit here and there with Wonder Man. This brings it completely to the forefront, especially with dealing with him and with Alex's perspective. And anyway, I'm getting more interested in that.
100%. All of the worldviews that each of the characters have in this issue are so interesting, and it's interesting that we have all of the Horsemen of Apocalypse sort of entering the conversations that the characters are either having internally or with each other, and providing a counterpoint that's just the cynical, complete opposite, soul-crushing version of that. The opposite position, you know what I mean? That will bring the character to their lowest point philosophically. It's a really interesting challenge for all of them. And all of the characters that are brought back have relationships with all these people to boot. So it's just such a resonating, emotional sort of thing to see these Horsemen of Apocalypse come and enter these people's lives, even though they're not even there for, more than 3 pages, most of them, really. It's really interesting.
Yeah, and at the same time, even with all that really weighty stuff, it gets really pulpy, and we get to go to another planet at the end.
It does, and I love that Remender, I mean, this was cool for me because I'm reading the Cap book, too. He talks about how his time in Dimension Z affected him, and he's having sort of the same thing, or the opposite of what he had when he came back from World War II, where he was in the past and he was entering the future. Now he went into the future and he's going back to the past to a degree, where he felt like he had aged 10 years, and he's going back to a point where that hadn't happened before. So it's an interesting place to put him that's totally contrary to the way it was before.
Yeah, and I found that immediately fascinating, and it's something I'm sure that I would have thought of already had I been reading the Cap book, but I just thought it was fascinating that, he was trapped in ice for a long time and had all that time pass him by, and now he's actually got to experience some of those years, but in an awful sort of way, you know what I mean?
Exactly.
It's the opposite of the horrible thing that happened to him before. Now it's experiencing too much time in a short amount of time, as opposed to time passing him and not getting to experience any of it. Captain America I think it's important to note that the man just aged 10 years. Captain America is not an immortal. His superpowers don't give him a healing factor like Wolverine or anything like that would keep him young. So the man is 10 years older now. I'm sure he wouldn't show it like other people would because he's a super soldier, but isn't that something important to keep in mind? And I think that it's not something that Remender is going to take lightly. I think that that's going to be a huge defining factor in his life for a good long time.
And what a bold choice on he and Marvel's part, letting one of their major icon characters age 10 years. That's not something you see happen ever. I mean, when they did it to Spider-Man, they've since brought him back to being sort of a teenager that's really supposed to be like 25. So
yeah, I mean, if you're going to do it to anybody,
I really appreciate that.
Again, it's easier to do it with Captain America because as a super soldier, he's probably not going to show it. But I think it's important to note that I don't think anybody would expect that Captain America would necessarily live all that much longer than a regular person. That's why he had to be in ice for so long.
Right.
So anyway,
very good stuff.
Anything else you want to know?
So impressed with this book.
Yeah. This still is great. I do have to admit to being a little bit lost with this book right now, and it's just because there's so much going on. I keep forgetting some of the big major things that are going on. I keep finding myself trying to remember, okay, where is Kang right now? Where is the Red Skull right now? Because all these characters are in the background. So anyway, I just need to do some homework. Probably. We're far enough in now, probably before the next issue, it would be very smart of me, I'm just saying this for me personally, to sit down and read the first 10 issues so that I'm a little bit more ready for this.
That's what I was going to say, too. Like, I'm sure if we had sat down and read this all the way through instead of month to month, we would have an experience where, like, it connects all very intricately and very interestingly for us, and we'd notice a lot of nuances that the writer's going for here.
Much of this would be more meaningful to me than I know it ought to be, but it's not right now. I keep having a hard time remembering where Rogue is in her positions politically, and
yeah, it's a lot to keep track of. But Remender is balancing it pretty well, I think. It's not like I've read some Grant Morrison things where I kind of throw my arms in the air and don't know what's going on at all. Like I I can sort of there's things to latch onto here without reading it as a whole. Morrison, a lot of the time, he'll lose me month to month. When I read together, it makes some sort of sense. This still makes sense, but less so.
It makes sense, but I know I'm missing some of the intricacies, and again, I'm just and again, he'll remind me of where people are, and I go, oh yeah, but then I'll go, I know there are pages, and I could point to which ones that I would have appreciated a lot more if I remembered where some of these characters are. You know, where are the Apocalypse twins right now? Where is you know, mostly with villains, because there's just so many in this book.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I agree with you.
Dan, it's time now for solo books, and what review would you like to grace us with first, sir?
The first one I'm going to go for is, since Wolverine came out this week, we're going to start Wolverine and the X-Men, number 33.
Oh,
by Jason Aaron and Nick Bradshaw once again.
Dan,
the third.
Are you reviewing? Dan, are you reviewing the Wolverine and the X-Men?
I wish there was a "the" in front of the Wolverine. That would be cool. I'm surprised they didn't have a banner on this of some kind. That's what DC and Marvel have done recently. But anyway, this book was enjoyable once again. I'm enjoying this arc quite a bit because it's sort of talking about the nature of good and evil and how much easier it is to be an evil person than it is to be a good person in the world contemporarily. Where Idy, who is one of the teenage female New Mutant characters that Aaron had used in Schism and has been using in his run since then, she talks a lot in here about how they were taught at this Hellfire school how to hate people and have no mercy and all that sort of thing, and how much harder it is to live that sort of life. And it calls into question whether or not it's effective to live that way and if it's fulfilling and that sort of thing. And of course, by the end of the issue we get an answer as to what she thinks about it, but it's sort of left ambiguous and up to the reader, and I'm sure it'll pay off and we'll have an uplifting ending by the end, hopefully. Yeah, I'm really liking that it's sort of in a tongue-in-cheek sort of way, as always with this book, the nature of what makes people good and what makes people evil, because we're at this really goofy, over-the-top school that teaches people how to be. It's cool to have some weighty stuff in there too. So, as always, this walks the line between being a really lighthearted book and a sort of heavy book at the same time, which is fun. I really like that about it. So, I'd recommend Wolverine and the X-Men if you're looking for that sort of lighthearted, goofy X-Men that you might not be getting in the more drama. Not that there's not drama here, but the more heavy Bendis stuff. If you're reading Uncanny, it's dark there, but it just gets really heavy in the Bendis stuff this time. And this has a little bit more levity, so it's good stuff.
I'm going to talk a little bit about Arrow number 9. This is a book that I've not read at all. I just wanted to check in on it because I've been curious about it. And
is Grell still doing some art on that?
Yeah, Grell is doing some art on
nice.
this. He draws. Where is it actually? Where is he? Where is he? Oh, he draws. Oh, that's why the first part of this is so good. He draws the first vignette in this. So, this book, people have been asking me for a while to take a look at this because, of course, I watch Arrow and I do a podcast with Eric on that, and I keep meaning to do this, and I just my pull list has been thick enough that I've never tried it. So I thought this week I'd pick it up and try it, and partially to see since I know that show, could I just pick this up and read it? And in fact, I can, and it's interesting that that what it does is it takes 3 of the shorter, 99-cent digital issues that they put up, and they put it in one issue. So so each of the 3 shorter 8-9 page things have nothing to do with each other, besides the fact that it's all, about this TV show. And each of them is written by a different person, it's drawn by a different person, although the entire thing is plotted by Mark Guggenheim. So he actually writes the first one.
He's the showrunner for the TV show.
Yeah, right? So he's plotting this thing out, and I think that makes a lot of sense because the thing has a really good sense of the continuity of this show. Everything that's in this would make perfect sense to be canon. The trouble with it is, most of what's in this, I don't know how important it is to have. It really does feel, it's supposed to be a supplemental book. It feels really supplemental, to the point of, I don't know if I'm getting anything, just from this first issue, that is all I've read, for this 9th issue, but just from this one issue that I've read, I don't know that I'm getting anything that's really informing this universe so much as, giving some extra scenes that could have been in the show. I guess it feels like scenes that were left on the cutting room floor, right?
That's exactly what I was gonna say. Yeah.
That's what it feels like to me. It's like these were deleted
scenes
of the
Arrow DVD
that maybe they didn't even they probably never shot, but and they probably never even thought to put in. But yeah, so there's not a real there's nothing holding all of this together. It's just each vignette is kind of some extra flashbacks to kind of flesh out the world a little bit. The first of the three is better than the rest of them. The one written by Guggenheim and drawn by Grell, and it's worth the whole thing. It's really quite good, and it focuses mostly on the work that John Diggle does behind the scenes to make sure that nobody knows that Oliver Queen is the vigilante, and so we get to see some key moments from the first three episodes of the show. We get to see things that happen around them. There is one major thing that it's not major, but there is one big moment that I actually kind of. I'll backtrack. Wish it had been in the show. There's this thing where in like I forget. I think it's the second episode maybe where where Diggle, of course, is Oliver's bodyguard, and this before he knows that Oliver Queen is the vigilante. And I have to say vigilante because he's not calling himself Green Arrow yet. And and what he does is. Oliver needs to get out of the party so that he can go put on a suit and be the vigilante, but Diggle's getting in his way because he's the bodyguard and he keeps following around. And I liked that dynamic for the time that we got it. Oliver knocks him out in that scene in the show. And then after that, as far as I remember, there's really not a lot of discussion between them about it. And here we get to see their reaction together. And Diggle, I don't mind spoiling this. Diggle actually punches him in the face, and it's kind of nice that we get that. And so that's a scene that would have been nice to be there in leading up to his finally learning that he's the vigilante. So you get a little bit of that. The middle one is. All about the relationship between Laurel and Merlin, and how she keeps saying she's only going to sleep with him one time, and then they sleep together again, and it's kind of just extra supplemental stuff about the romance that frankly we kind of knew already. I didn't get anything really extra there, and the only one that really has much of much of Oliver at all. Well, actually, none of them have much of Oliver at all, which is part of what I didn't like that much about it. Is the end one, we finally actually kind of have him in costume for a little bit, where he kind of, and it's interesting, where he kind of has to prove to a cop why he thinks he's necessary, and this cop, refuses to kill Oliver, to kill the vigilante, even though he's, supposed to subdue him if he finds him, but Oliver tells him that that's why he's necessary, because the cops aren't willing to do the dirty work. And so there's this nice kind of juxtaposition of, well, if you really thought I was as dangerous as you think you were, you would kill me like I'm killing the real dangerous people. That sort of dynamic. So it's okay, a little typical, but it works. Anyway, so it's not bad. I don't think I would buy this all the time. So anyway, I mean...
do you feel like it's hindered at all, storytelling-wise, by the fact that it has to be those short digital chapters, like we had talked about before with some of the DC books, where they're making anthologies of, 9-page stories? Does that affect your enjoyment of it at all?
Yeah, I'm not real interested in that, just personally, but I don't know how else it could be done either, because again, it's supplemental stuff. I don't know how they could tell full-fledged stories around what's going on in the TV show. It would be difficult to have some big, huge adventure where because everything in the show is tight-knit enough that it would be hard to have extra episodic adventures of Oliver running off and doing something that would be, really violent without us never hearing about it in the rest of the show. So I'm not sure how else they would do it. I kind of think that it would make sense if they had just kept this digital and they didn't really print it. It seems a little bit of a strange thing to buy in print for me, just for my taste. Right, it's not bad. It's really it's pretty good. But with as many things as I'm reading right now, I'm not sure if I would make the time for it.
Especially since there's already a Green Arrow book in the stands that a lot, you've been saying it's great and a lot of people have been really liking.
That's absolutely
when there's
right.
a good other option out there, why really bother? I can understand that.
What do you got next for us, Dan?
The next thing I have is Captain America #9. This is another Rick Remender book. This is, of course, Rick Remender and John Romita Jr. on art. And this continues where we had left Cap at the end of the last issue, where he's basically been broken down to his lowest point. I don't mind spoiling this now because it happened last issue. Ian, the kid that Captain America has been raising for 10 years in Dimension Z, was killed at the end of the last issue. He had been brainwashed by Aram Zola. He was trying to kill Captain America, and Cap was just about to turn him back over to, make him remember that he was his son and, all the good memories they had together right before he was killed. So Cap, he's sort of questioning the optimism that's, inherent in his character because he's at such a low point. He's been physically broken and emotionally broken at this point. So we see him sort of not at first living up to that, thing he had been saying to Ian throughout this whole story was never remain down, always stand up. That's what he keeps saying. And Sharon Carter comes back and she sort of inspires him to get up again and get out of there, and we have him have a knockout battle with Aram Zola finally. That's very cool to see. They're punching and hitting each other. And through the fight there's a really interesting dialogue. Them sort of similar to what had happened with the Red Skull in the first arc of Uncanny Avengers, where it's that sort of philosophical battle, Captain America's optimism and altruism, wanting to help people, versus Aram Zola's sort of like manipulation of others and wanting to subjugate them and doubting people and saying that they're not smart enough to take care of themselves and that sort of thing. And he's divinely inspired to bring people to a better place, and Captain America wants to put his faith in us as individuals, that sort of thing. So that's all really interesting and very, especially for a Captain America book, good ideas to talk about, I think. So that's all really interesting, and Aram Zola makes one last-ditch effort to manipulate not just the entire world like he'd been planning throughout this whole story arc, but one of the other characters in the story too. So it'll be interesting to see where that goes in the next issue, and that'll be the last issue of this big epic that Remender's been telling for the last 10 issues. So this ended in a really interesting place. I'm really interested to see where it goes, and I'm loving this. Once again, it's great stuff.
I love how well they're keeping track. Again, we keep saying this, of where characters are right now and where they're going to be, and that it actually deals with where Captain America just was in Dimension Z over in Uncanny Avengers. Because I got to tell you, and I'm going to talk about this with with the next thing that I review, DC's not doing that.
Yeah, we give a lot of credit to the writers when we talk about this stuff, but I think we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about how tightly editorial is working at Marvel right now. They're just knocking it out of the park with everything. Yeah. Especially the people because I know Nick Lowe, I think, is the head of the X-Men line, if I remember correctly, and then Brevoort is the Avengers guy, so it's multiple editors working together. It's not even like it's one guy. They're just working on all cylinders as a team right now, and it's really, really impressive.
Boy, wouldn't that be a really interesting job? Like, we're paid to make sure we know where Captain America is right now.
I've seen a video, it was like, iFanboy did, it was like an inside DC video where they went at the Batman office and they have like bulletin boards of like, that they shift around with all the characters and stuff, at least in the Batman office. Yeah. I don't know how it works at Marvel, but it's cool how they set all that stuff up.
The next thing I've got is, well, technically, Justice League Dark number 22, the third part of Trinity War. Last week, I did not get my hands on Justice League of America. My store was out, and so I didn't get a chance to review this one. So I'm going to be primarily reviewing Justice League Dark number 22, but I'm kind of going to be mixing this up and talking about both of these simultaneously and telling you just kind of where we are right now with Trinity War.
Interconnected sort of thing.
And it's all running together in my brain, so I won't even remember exactly what happens where.
Right, definitely.
Jeff Johns and Jeff Lemire are, which is funny because they're two Jeffs that spell their names differently. Jeff Johns and Jeff Lemire are kind of co-plotting this, and actually they both wrote Justice League of America number 6, and then Lemire gets Justice League Dark by itself. This is all starting to become a lot more clear as to what exactly is going on with this, and I'm starting to really enjoy it. First of all, I gotta say that it's a really bold-looking event. It's very old school old school, late 90s, early 2000s and beyond, of the way that big DC events with all of these characters can be, where I'm thinking of things like Blackest Night and stuff like that, where it feels really big, really grandiose, worth the epic proportions that it is, and the art is just beautiful. And you feel like it's an event. You feel like it's a big deal. It's not just, it doesn't feel like it's just there for the sake of being there, at least in my opinion. It's maybe a little bit typical in the kind of event it is, in that, you know, it's a bunch of characters
fighting each other.
And it's also a bunch of characters all being manipulated by pretty much, we're finding out, it seems to be one big entity trying to get them to all kind of go against each other. It's a big mystery plot. Big Justice League events are usually some kind of mystery, usually revolving around somebody getting murdered, and dealing with the politics of trying to be a superhero while people think that you killed someone. That seems to be a motif in DC over the last few years, beginning really with Identity Crisis. What we have here is all of our three big characters in our Trinity, not Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman. Our big of this Trinity, our big three characters are very much now kind of planted in what their motivations are and what they're trying to achieve. Let me say this. We kind of know what they're trying to do. We don't exactly know why all of them are doing it yet. So the motivations aren't entirely clear, but I'm trusting that it will be very soon. So you've got Pandora, who is trying to find the box again so that she can put all the evil back in it. You've got you've got now the Question. Really fun to see the Question back, and
that's cool. It's Vic Sage, right?
It's Vic Sage, and he is not interested in the box. He's trying to convince Superman that it was not the evil from the box that caused him to kill a person that he did not mean to kill. That happened, and there's also a question about whether or not he even did it at all, whether it was on purpose or otherwise. And then you have the Phantom Stranger, who is dealing a lot with Justice League Dark in here in number 22, who is trying to convince the Justice League to go actually find the box. I think I've got that all straight. It's kind of complicated.
It does sound very involved, sort of like the Avengers thing we were talking about.
It is involved. Anyway, I think that's right. No, I'm sorry. I'm backwards. It's the Phantom Stranger that doesn't think that the box has anything to do with what happened with Superman. It's the Question who does. And Wonder Woman is kind of leading a charge to go find the box. Makes a lot of sense because she's obviously an Amazon and is part of the whole Greek mythology thing, and she believes that the box, when Pandora opened it, really did release the evil that has made people capable of doing bad things. And so what's fun about this is that, and what I'm enjoying about it, is that it's making different characters kind of question their philosophies and ideologies a little bit about what it is that that forces people to do evil.
Especially since we know where it's going now with that forever evil thing.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. I forgot about that. Yeah, it's of course is it man's choices that make him do bad things, or is it just is it magic? You know, is it the course of the universe has already been set, predestination, that kind of thing? I talked about that a little before. It's becoming more and more prominent here, and becoming a little bit less about just these people all fighting each other, and more all of them just trying to figure out who's manipulating them and what exactly is going on. There is a fourth entity here. There's a fourth power that by the end of part 3, you realize is trying to move people around like pieces on a chessboard, and Pandora is the queen that this guy has been trying to get everybody away from, and have the unprotected queen, and that sort of thing. And I'm not real sure what his what exactly his whole reason for doing all of this is, but he's kidnapped Madame Xanadu. And I'm not sure exactly why, but he's kidnapped her and he's using her for his evil. Of course, she has precognition, and that's really important because, again, it is a free will versus predestination thing. So if you have somebody that can read the future and tell you things, it brings all of that more and more into question. And so
that's interesting.
And so I really like Superman, this guy who believes that man's choices, that man has a choice and that he's responsible for his actions.
That's one of the big
it's cool. And he's helpless in this book. He's done something he couldn't control, and he's having to question all of that, and defiantly saying, no, I don't agree with that, even while whatever it is that affected him is making him so sick that he's totally, completely pale, and he's flying around with a super pale, sick Superman face. There's some cool stuff in here that I've not really seen a lot of, and like I said, I call it typical. The more I'm thinking about it, the more I'm liking where it's going. So, anyway, it might feel less typical when you get to the end of it. I like all the magic involved. That's a little bit unusual. Getting Justice League Dark in here is where this thing got really interesting. Getting those magical characters in there, because what they say, especially John Constantine's a big thing in this, and especially his position is humankind, a society uses reason and science to try to explain things that we know are unexplainable. There is magic, we don't know how it works, and so people are bad because there's this magic thing that made them that way, and we have to know how to control that magic before we need to know how to control ourselves. It's kind of a dangerous position. It's a little scary.
It is.
So anyway,
and it's almost the same sort of thing that Superman's talking about, except that he looks at it like we have to control ourselves as in a moral sense, where John Constantine is like, let's control the magic that makes people have bad morals. It's sort of the same sort of thing, just with different concepts backing them up, The
difficulty, I'm going to get kind of philosophical for a minute, the difficulty in understanding our purpose as human beings is that any way you slice it, whether you think about it as we're all predestined to do whatever it is we're doing, or we have a choice in doing it, it's still the same problem, which is figuring out what our importance or lack of importance really is. If you believe that everything is just set already and there's nothing we can do to help it, then what is the point of trying to accomplish anything, because it's going to happen anyway? But on the other hand, if you believe we all have a choice, but we can't each individually really accomplish very much because the world is just too big for us, or nothing we do really matters because there isn't some big thing that we're all working toward that somebody knows about already because of predestination, then what's the point also? So either way you slice it, we're all going through life kind of blindly trying to figure out what in the world our purpose here is, and to figure out whether or not we each individually have any significance. Any book that can make me think about all that and reason it and try to reason it out is
enjoyable.
It's making me think. It's enjoyable, but it's also thoughtful, and I always really appreciate that. I hate sitting here trying to analyze this sort of thing halfway through it, so I apologize for that. This is something I should not really be analyzing until I know where it's going and where it comes down on the whole thing. But it's stuff worth thinking about, and it's also really fun to see a bunch of characters that I don't usually get to read about and that I know a lot about. I wonder about the thing with the Question, because he's different than he was pre-52. His whole thing, or I think he's different. He's trying to figure out like who he is and what his name is. He doesn't know that in this. And he also, if I didn't read this wrong, seems to be actually missing his face and doesn't know why, as opposed to wearing a mask. I'm not. So anyway, I don't know if the question has ever been characterized that way. It's not a character I know a whole lot about.
Not that I know of, but I haven't read a ton of it either.
From what I've read and what I've seen on things like, you know, the Justice League cartoon and stuff like that, it wasn't.
He always knows that he's Vic Sage, and it's usually a mask, isn't it?
Yeah, I thought so. Yeah. I mean, he knows who he is, and he's basically just a big conspiracy nut who's always right. Yeah. You know, a little different here.
That was Steve Ditko's whole sort of political mantra, and
yeah, and kind of who Rorschach
sort of
is based
channeling
on.
Through that character in Mr. A as well.
Yeah, exactly, and again, kind of where Rorschach is.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe they're trying to get away from him being like Rorschach, which would be really ironic.
Yeah, it would. Also, one more thing. I'm sorry. I'd like Steve Trevor to have a superhero name. I'm sorry, he's wearing a costume. He needs his own superhero name. This is how I feel about it.
I sort of thought they were trying to make him like the Nick Fury of the DC universe.
They are, but he's wearing this big like commando suit that makes him look like a superhero, and I just think it's weird. But whatever, that's just me. No, you're right. They are kind of making him out to be that, and Amanda Waller's kind of on the other side of that, although they're sort of, I don't know, kind of working together.
Anyway, it's sort of like Nick Fury and Maria Hill. He's always running S.H.I.E.L.D., and they have opposite positions. They fight with each other.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Cool.
Waller is a little bit different in this too. She doesn't seem to be quite as slimy and smarmy as she used to be, and she's also not heavyset anymore. She's like a skinny Amanda Waller now.
Yeah, I remember when the first time that showed up in Suicide Squad. I remember Manos was quite upset about that.
It's like, why? It's like, look. Not everybody has to be it has to be super attractive. It's kind of fun when you can have characters that look like regular people. Well, I mean, there are regular, really attractive people too, but there are also regular, not as, you know, slender. Anyway, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're
Go ahead, Dan.
My next book is New Avengers, number 8. And this is the first issue that ties into Jonathan Hickman's Infinity event that's upcoming. And this was enjoyable for the most part in that we didn't really start dealing with the event stuff. I mean, this has sort of been trying to build where Hickman's been going with all this stuff, obviously, because these two books in the main Avengers book are supposed to be somewhat connected, but this one I think has been pretty good at being self-contained so far. So the first part of the issue deals a lot with the Cold War between the Wakandans and the Atlanteans that had been set up in the previous issue, where the Wakandans are still bitter about Namor destroying their big city in AVX. And since T'Challa is no longer the ruler of Wakanda, his sister is the queen. He was advising her in the last issue, telling her to not go to war with Namor, and now they're fighting this proxy war, and they're sabotaging things with Namor's people. And Namor doesn't know. He thinks that there's a peace treaty between them, so we're dealing with that sort of conversation between the two of them. T'Challa goes to him and says, you might want to know about this sort of thing. I'm telling you so that you know to look out, because he doesn't want Namor, who's his pseudo-ally here, to have his people suffer the way that T'Challa's did. He's acting nobly, but Namor, who's the hothead, gets a little bit upset with him, and it's a whole big internal politics thing, and I'm really liking that about this book. We have more of Reed Richards and Tony Stark pondering the moral philosophy of this thing they're trying to do with destroying worlds to save their own, and how far mankind must go to preserve their existence in the universe, and when should we say it's our turn is over and we should let another species take over and give someone else a chance, that sort of thing. It's really big concept universe kind of stuff, and then you get this grounded, like, internal worldly politics sort of thing, so it's all very, very cool. The one thing that sort of lost me at the end here was an invasion starts happening, and the only reason I know it's related to Thanos is because the guy in the Free Comic Book Day issue shows up here. The guy that Thanos had sent to talk to that race of people. Do you remember that? He shows up there, and I was like, oh, I guess this is Thanos' army, but I would have had no idea otherwise. So it looks like it's going to start tying into events and stuff, and I don't really want to have to read the other Avengers book, but Hickman said you have to. So it'll be interesting to see how self-contained this stays moving forward. I hope it does, because there's a lot of interesting stuff going on here, especially with the Wakandans and Black Bolt and all that sort of thing. So it's very, very interesting stuff.
I'm sure I've asked you this before. Is Infinity going to be a mini, or is it going to tie into those two? Is it just going to be those two books?
It has a mini, and then it's tying into this book and the regular Avengers book, and Hickman said that the mini is like, however many issues it is, the series and the story is really all 18 when it goes through all the books.
Wow, and so he wants you to read all of it? You can't read Infinity by itself? Wow.
He said that's what you should do. I don't know if it's necessary or not, but that's what he said in interviews and things, so it'll be interesting to see.
Well, I hope it's good, because that's probably what you and I will be doing.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, or you.
I think we may have already missed the boat on the Avengers stuff, because the prelude for that started a couple months ago.
Well, I don't. The thing is, do you have to read the prelude? Because I usually skip those. Like.
I don't know. I'm just continuing to read this because I like this book a lot.
Well, then I'll just be a jerk and just ask you questions, and then.
I haven't been reading the main Avengers book since the first 3 issues because I got bored with it and wasn't really caring for it too much.
Yeah, that's how far I got.
Yeah.
Anyway,
well, yeah, I'd recommend that book, and hopefully it doesn't get too eventy.
Moving right along. Good luck. I think it's going to. Moving right along, I'm going to review Ghostbusters number 6. This, again, is Burnham and Cherning. And here we get kind of a love triangle between this English teacher and Egon and Janine. And that it's handled by taking, and this has been kind of a triangle that's been built up to a little bit, and basically there are these, I want to say these like Viking ghosts. I think they're kind of Vikings, and anyway, they show up and they possess Janine, and then Egon is trying to get them to unpossess her, so he does something that he tries to suck them up into a trap. This is kind of cool. They have a wall trap just in case any ghosts ever actually break into the firehouse. They actually have this giant wall trap, which is kind of neat. And it's opened by the code phrase, "I love the Red Sox." Because that's because where they are in New York, they think it's an unlikely thing for someone to just say around that wall trap.
New York don't like the Red Sox. I've experienced that firsthand.
So anyway, I thought that was hilarious, and
that's cool.
Basically they try to suck them in, and it doesn't work right away, and instead they get somehow sucked into Janine's consciousness, and they experience a whole bunch of events from her past, and it's kind of fun, the continuity,
cool.
And how Burnham deals with some of the movie stuff and some of the comic book stuff, and blending all of that sort of thing together. There's a mention of Louis Tully from when they had kind of a fling in Ghostbusters 2, and it's fun how he handles it, because they go to that memory, and you hear her say his name, and they seem to be kind of making out on a couch or something, but you don't get to see him, because Burnham told me when I interviewed him I want to say a year and a half ago now, 2 years ago. When I talked to him, I asked him if he could use what characters he could use, and that was a character that for some reason they're not letting him use. So that's the closest he's ever been able to get to actually using that character. Is his name gets said in a memory that he's in.
It's really weird that they can say his name but not use him.
Yeah, I know. Isn't that weird? Anyway, so there's that, and so basically it's a kind of a rescue operation where these two guys that don't really like each other very much have to work together to rescue this girl that they both like. It's that kind of classic story, but it's done pretty well. And I just realized that one of these Vikings has an infinity symbol on his gauntlet. That's kind of funny. I don't know.
That's cool.
It makes sense. They're ghosts. But anyway, so
Thanos is going to show up soon.
Yes. So anyway, that's pretty much what happens there, and it's a fun story. I like how prominent Janine has gotten in this book, and I like that there's this big story here that deals with her, and they have this kind of fun, getting sucked up into her brain thing, because I didn't like that they stopped having her be a Ghostbuster, because I really enjoyed her actually being on the field, being a Ghostbuster. So I'm getting more and more of the sense that she's going to keep getting thrust into things and isn't going to quite get to just go back to a desk job. I get the feeling that Burnham is kind of fascinated with her character and doing things with her. So I think that this might be partially him saying, don't worry, she's still a major part of this book. So yeah, I enjoyed that quite a bit.
That's awesome. The next one I have is the Hawkeye Annual. This is by Fraction and Javier Pulido, who penciled the arc in Hawkeye where Madame Mask showed up, and this is sort of the sequel of sorts to that, where we have Madame Mask come back. Kate Bishop takes a trip to Los Angeles after she sort of moves out of Clint's house because he's sort of moping around after someone was assassinated in his apartment building previously. So we have her going on an adventure in Los Angeles, trying to live on her own and try to break away from, as a teenager, break away from her parents and Clint, all the people that are sort of trying to help her and support her. This is sort of a character arc she goes through in this issue of learning to accept help from other people and to not take herself too seriously as a teenager. Sometimes that happens. You want to become more independent than you're ready to be at times when you're around her age, late teens, early 20s, that sort of age, where you're, testing the waters with that sort of thing. And it's written in a very convincing way as, and relatable to someone like me that's going through that same sort of age and those same sort of trials and tribulations now. I really appreciated that, and I related to it quite a bit. And it's juxtaposed with this thing with Madame Mask going on, where she's trying to get revenge on Kate for screwing her over previously, and it talks a lot about the relationships that people have with each other and how superficial they can be, and what it means to have an interpersonal relationship with another person, romantic or otherwise. So I really like this. It's continuing to build an ongoing story in this book in a way that is so contrary to the way it's usually done, where we're taking detours, but from a plot that is interlaced in little bits and pieces throughout the issues, and this is no exception. It's really interesting stuff. I dug this quite a bit. It's a $5 annual, but you get your money's worth in pages. So this isn't one that's absolutely necessary. It's not even about Clint Barton. He shows up on the first 2 pages, and then it's all about Kate Bishop, who is just as interesting of a character in my opinion. So if you've been following the series so far and you've enjoyed Kate in her recurring role as a supporting character in that, you'll dig this. It's pretty good. I liked it quite a bit.
Next up, I'm going to talk about Star Trek number 23, which is a really strange issue in that I have not liked this arc, and I liked this better than the rest of it. It's really unusual to have a wrap-up that's better than the rest of it. I was ready to see this arc finished, and I liked this a lot better. The first thing that I liked a lot better about this is just that I got a better sense as to what exactly was going on with the kind of caveman Vulcans from the end of the last issue that Spock just runs off and joins, and I don't know if this was stated explicitly and I just didn't catch on to it last issue or what, but the deal is, and I don't know if I buy this, but it's better than what I thought it was. The deal is, the cavemen-looking Vulcans that have kind of lost all of their logic and they're freaking out and they've gotten really primitive. They are all Vulcans that are going through Ponfar and can't get over their Ponfar. That's what it turns out that they all are, and Spock just has run up with them because that's what they all are. They've basically, the idea is this takes the original series notion of Ponfar as opposed to, again, I've talked about this a little bit, the later series Ponfar stuff where they found loopholes in later shows as to how to get a Vulcan to complete his Ponfar or hers without going back to Vulcan. Here it goes back to the traditional TOS idea from Amok time, where it isn't just that you have to find your Vulcan mate and bond with her, it's that you really do have to go back to the planet. And so since there is no Vulcan left, that's why this is happening. So New Vulcan isn't enough. There's no Vulcan left. So this could spell the end of their whole race.
Because that was one of the questions I had when you were talking about it. That's interesting.
And I think that's interesting. It doesn't gel with the rest of Star Trek necessarily, but just taking the original series on its own and kind of forgetting none of the other Ponfar episodes were any good. So I'm kind of okay with that. Blood Fever from Voyager is one of my least favorite episodes. They also did it in Enterprise with DePaul. I didn't think Ponfar even happened to girls. Maybe it does. I don't know. These are all men. And the thing about it is, they're starting to get a little really nervous about this, because this could happen to their entire species. I mean, it's basically going to turn the Vulcans into a bunch of sort of pseudo zombies, really. Chekhov because Chekhov is a transporter genius in the new stuff. I still don't like that, but whatever. Chekhov comes up with, I'm going to spoil this, I hope nobody minds, but this is just, you know, I don't know how else to talk about this without telling you kind of how they solve this. He comes up with this notion of tricking the Vulcan body through a transporter into thinking that it is on Vulcan, because they have they have all of the records from Spock and other Vulcans beaming on and off of Vulcan, and so they can create the atmosphere of Vulcan, and it's different than just going on this planet because it actually really is the atmosphere of Vulcan. I guess that works. It's okay. What's weird about it is it seems like a temporary solution. Because it seems like this Vulcan Ponfar happens every 7 years, and there are still enough of them that this sort of thing should be happening pretty much all the time, or at least a few times a year, I would figure. So, you know, but they come up with a solution, and now that I know that the premise isn't quite as dumb as I thought it was, I liked it quite a bit better. This is not something I've talked about with this book, but I don't understand why the words in this book in the dialogue balloons are so enormous. It looks like large print. Yeah, let me show you this. It just because it wasn't like this early on, but I mean, like, look at that. It looks like a large print book to me.
It looks like
a kid's book,
all ages books or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. It's like what the words look like in Archie's Sonic the Hedgehog or something.
Yeah, or the I don't know if they were like that in the Ninja Turtles book that we reviewed a couple of weeks ago. I can't really remember, but
it just feels like they know from. No, that one wasn't quite as much like that, and there was more language in those. Here, it seems like we're being very deliberate now to make sure that we don't have too many words on a page. Like we're trying to make sure that kids can read this. So it's kind of interesting. I'm not sure why they're doing that, but
especially with a Star Trek book, that's not something I would say would immediately appeal for children to pick up and read. You know,
it doesn't really affect the book that much. I just wanted to mention it because I thought it was interesting.
Yeah, it's an interesting choice.
And then there's a neat reveal at the end of this that ties the whole thing back to Star Trek Into Darkness. This arc was just called After Darkness, and it ties things back into one of the major elements from Darkness, and and once again that's about the Romulans trying to manipulate a war with the Klingons and with the Federation and stuff. So it's getting interesting. Cool. It was also fun to see the star charts on the. This is just me as a geeky Star Trek fan. It was fun to get to see the star charts on the Romulan screens of where the Federation is and Kronos and all the planets, because it looks. Because they used the old star charts that they had in DS9 and TNG and stuff, and I recognized them. Cool. So I actually have a star chart, but the Star Trek star chart book, and it looks just like that. So it's kind of fun to see that again.
Nice, that's awesome.
So yeah, all in all, that was better than the other ones. I liked it okay. It was a little quick, knock it out, wrap it up real fast, kind of a 5-minute wrap up, but it was all right.
Liking, but at the same time really surprised that they're not shying away from the Cold War allegory stuff that was an original series and sort of trying to reinvent it, with like the Klingons and the Federation having a proxy Cold War kind of thing going on where they're, not officially at war, but they, do shadowy things and, to sabotage each other and things like that.
And like a third party trying to force, it's like First Class.
Yeah, true.
Yeah. Go ahead.
The next book I have is Aquaman, number 22. Is by Jeff Johns and Paul Pelletier, as usual. And this is some more really interesting stuff going on with Aquaman. More sort of kingship, Shakespearean sort of things, really, that I've been loving with this book so far, where we learn some things about Arthur's heritage and his bloodline that may call into question his kingship. Orm is about to be breaking out of prison by some of Arthur's generals that don't trust him. So Arthur's rule as king is sort of collapsing around him as he's trying to sort of quell this enemy from Atlantis' past, who's the first king, the first person who had been on the throne of Atlantis and had been on the throne when the city had originally sunk into the ocean, and had created all these artifacts that the Atlanteans had used to survive underwater, including Arthur's own trident. So he's this ancient kind of sagic figure that has all this knowledge we don't really know about. So he's an interesting villain. And we're also in the Bermuda Triangle, which was a prison colony for the Atlanteans. And Mera is a product of the culture that formed there. So it's all this really interesting sort of things. The skeletons in the closet of the Atlantean culture, and Arthur sort of coming to terms with them as he's coming to terms with the skeletons in his own closet. I found all that stuff to be really interesting, and I'm still loving this Aquaman book. It's great. All the internal politics and all that sort of thing are really interesting, along with the grounded characterizations that Jeff Johns has and all the great voices he has for the characters. So, yeah, this continues to be my favorite DC book that's being put out. Really, really good stuff.
Real quick before I go on, there was a point I meant to make with the Justice League books, and I totally forgot about this, because I had mentioned earlier that DC has not been doing as good of a job as Marvel of keeping track of where their characters are supposed to be from book to book, and sometimes they'll just be in random places where they couldn't possibly have been in two places at once or whatever. That's going on with Green Arrow in those books, as far as I can tell. I'm having a tough time buying that he's on the quest that he's on for the totems in his book at the same time as he's with the Justice League, with Justice League of America in these books. Maybe I've missed something because I haven't read any of him in those books.
Right,
maybe it makes sense that he's there somehow, but I'm having a tough time buying that he's somehow going back and forth, or maybe the timelines are different. I'm not sure. But anyway, I just want to throw that out there because it's kind of weird.
Yeah, sure. I think he had joined the Justice League of America before Lemire took over, so maybe that's where the issue comes from.
I think so too.
But at the same time, that's sort of weird because Lemire is co-writing that whole thing with Johns, isn't he?
Yeah. Yeah, he is. So
that's interesting.
Again, maybe there's something that I've missed where it's explained and I just didn't catch it, or haven't read the thing where it's explained. But that leads us into Batman the Dark Knight number 22, because we've got, with Greg Hurwitz, this great sense of continuity with at least Snyder's book. The other books aren't doing this as much, and I'm not sure that he's keeping track of, all of the other things. But at least
impossible to.
He spun off the short two-part Clayface thing from Snyder's Batman into this book.
Oh, very interesting.
And also discusses that. So is it just that suddenly Clayface is here? They talk about Clayface being in that other book and what happened there and how it relates to this. So that's pretty cool. I really like thematically what he's doing with Batman and Clayface here. He's got this story about jumping right off from the death of Bruce Wayne's most recent girlfriend and how sad all that was. This notion of Batman's inability and unwillingness to change, which is at the core of his character, something that I love about Batman, and something that always prevents Dan from becoming as big of a Batman fan as I am. And I love how this handles it, right?
That's exactly what it is.
I love how he handles this. Clayface's power is the ability to physically change, and he's also starting to show a little bit different of an MO, which seems to be something Greg Hurwitz is liking to do with some of these villains, getting them past the thing that they always did, where it still fits within the whole motif of their character, but he's evolving them a little bit so that their MO isn't exactly the same, but again, it still fits with that. So the big mystery here is why Clayface is suddenly acting so different. He's acting a bit out of character, and the book realizes it. Batman realizes it, and what he does is he hires a gang. Clayface has always worked by himself before. Suddenly he's got a gang, and then suddenly he kills them all, and we don't know why he's doing that. We have no idea what his whole thing is. Batman suspects that there is probably someone else he's working for, and that's the big question: is Clayface working on his own, or is he working for someone else? We don't know yet. So that's the big question. At the beginning of this, he pretends to be Gordon, and Clayface Gordon goes postal and tries to kill Bruce, which is kind of fun because it's the opposite of what Snyder did with Batman. Because there, if memory serves, it was he turns into Bruce and he's got a gun and he goes up against the real Gordon, I think, if I'm remembering correctly. So that's pretty fun. And again, dealing with this motif of change, we've got Gordon suddenly seeming to be at the beginning, of course. We can guess pretty well, especially from the cover. Actually, the cover has nothing to do with Clayface, but just, the cover is when allies become deadly enemies. Well, we know that's probably not going to happen. Anyway, so Clayface Gordon freaking out, going postal on Batman. We know that kind of thing would never happen. But then with Gordon's character, it's also dealing with his refusal to change, in that he's always going to trust Batman no matter what, and he's in this terrible place where he's kind of lying, bleeding on top of the roof of police headquarters, and he's trying desperately to get to the bat signal so that Batman can help him, and I kind of like all that. Alfred challenges Batman in a really great way here, where he basically says that Batman keeps causing these problems, like with the death of his girlfriend, kind of brings them on himself, because he refuses to change. He refuses to deal with these sorts of really terrible emotional things that happen to him, and so he's setting himself up to just keep doing it over and over again. What I'm loving is, I complained, or didn't complain, but I was a little bit cautious and concerned when we first had Natalia. Ironic that her name sounds a little bit like Talia, yeah?
Yeah, that's true.
He had this girlfriend named Natalia, and I was like, well, there's only a couple ways this can end. Either she's going to leave him or she's going to die, because Batman never has a girlfriend for very long, and we're just doing this again. And I didn't think he'd kill her in that arc, and then he did, Hurwitz, but not Batman. I didn't think Hurwitz would kill her off in that arc, but then he did, and I was kind of afraid that it would just, kind of, she would either leave or something, and it would just kind of pass away. We would forget about this character. He's actually making a point about how, in the history of Batman, the same thing happens over and over and over again because of his refusal to change, and that he never just completely owns being Batman to the point where he won't have personal relationships, but yet when he has them and they fail, he never works it out emotionally. He just moves on as if it never happened in the first place. So, I guess my point is, in an arc that ended in, for me, a not real satisfying way, is suddenly pretty much totally redeemed here with this issue. I was very impressed with this, and I'm just loving Hurwitz. He's such a good writer.
That's really interesting that he defied your expectations by playing into a sort of cliche of the Batman mythos, and then put an interesting spin on it with the next issue, where he's turning it into a character arc for him. That's really interesting.
Yeah, and then does what a lot of the best Batman stories do. He uses the villain motif as an allegory for it.
That's awesome.
Good stuff.
That's something maybe I would, another one of the DC books in trade that I'd like to get eventually. That Trinity War and Green Arrow are things that I'd like to check out eventually sometime. This sounds really interesting.
I also want to mention real quick, I forgot about this, that the art is kind of dramatically different in this issue. It's Alex Maleev, and
that's interesting.
Yeah, and it's I like Maleev too, and it's really good Alex Maleev. He is it's gritty. And kind of liney, and it's really cool for Clayface. The grittiness of it. It's kind of a neat way to approach Clayface. I've been looking at a lot of Alex Maleev art lately in the old Sam and Twitch book, working on Spawn Year, and so it's kind of fun to see the juxtaposition there. If you go back to somebody like Capullo working on Spawn, then going over to Batman, he's got two entirely different styles because he was kind of aping McFarlane. You go to somebody like Alex Maleev, and you come over to this, and his artwork looks pretty much the same. It's not that.
Yeah,
it's not that
I'm
different.
a big fan of his work on Daredevil with Bendis. The whole run that he did with him on that book. That's where I sort of fell in love with his art.
Like Batman, he does not change. No, I'm kidding. I'm not saying that the man has no range, but he's being his style was brought in for this for a particular purpose, and it's working out really well.
That sounds great. But should we move on to the...
Let's move on, shall we? You've got,
the next book
two more
I
books?
have is Green Hornet #4.
Yes.
This is by the great Mark Waid, and a new artist we have here, Ronlinson Frieri. I probably completely butchered that name, and I'm very sorry. This continues to be really interesting. Waid is doing this great thing with this book, where... do you remember what he did with the Spot in Daredevil, where he would set up a antagonist where you thought it was them, and then he would defy your expectations, and the mystery was 4 times bigger than you thought it was before, and it was way over the hero, even more over the hero's head than you had thought before.
Yeah.
He does that every issue with this book. This continues to have this really interesting sort of underbelly of society espionage sort of thing, where it's like a class war between the rich and the poor, and Green Hornet's caught in the middle and trying to be the arbiter of the two. And Kato and him, at the end of the last issue, Kato had left. He did not think that Green Hornet's way of being a ambassador between the two sort of classes was being effective, because basically Britt Reed, who is the publisher of the Daily Sentinel, a lot of people had been saying he should promote activism to the newspaper and exposing the truth and being a muck raker, basically, that 40s era kind of crusading newspaper kind of person, the same vein as someone like Lois Lane or Perry White. So you have a lot of people saying he should do that, but he ends up being a candidate for mayor, running under the sort of, political party of the upper rich ruling class of society. And he, at the same time, of course, he's going around presenting to be a criminal as a Green Hornet. And Kato doesn't believe that he should be having a public face and fighting in that way. So Kato's trying to ruin his political career, and there had been a bunch of assassinations that had sort of screwed up Britt Reed's campaign. And it looks like at the end of this, some of the people that were trying to get Britt Reed to run for mayor were responsible for dismantling his political career as well, and they're manipulating that whole thing. We don't really know why. It's really interesting stuff, and it's endearing to see a character like Green Hornet wanting to do good, but just not understanding the full extent of the situation that's in front of him. It's really, really interesting stuff, and it's really involved, but Wade gets you through it really well. So I'm really, really enjoying this book so far. I wouldn't expect to be enjoying a Green Hornet book as much as I am, but, it's Mark Waid. He works wonders, so it's great stuff.
I didn't think you'd stay on that book, but I can totally see why you have.
Yeah, I'm really, really enjoying it, especially the period piece aspect of it. Wade is doing a lot with dealing with the issues of the time, like the lower class labor working people and their rights, and having to fight for that sort of thing. It's very well researched. You can tell Wade is very authentic in the way he writes people of that time.
Yeah. Last book.
The last book I have is Star Wars Legacy, number 5. This is, of course, once again by the team Karina Pacheco and Gabriel Hardman co-writing, and Hardman does the art on this. And this continues to just be a really, really interesting take on the Star Wars universe, and so contrary but familiar at the same time to things we had seen before. I had mentioned the status quo of this book basically is black and white doesn't exist in the Star Wars universe anymore. The Empire and the Republic have fused together. There's a triumvirate now, where the is sort of like British society, where the Queen, who is the Empress in here, doesn't really have any power, and then there's a democratic governing body. And there's allusions to the fact that it's corrupt and all that sort of thing, like, some republics eventually get to that point. So we have the Sith Lord who's trying to undo all of those things, of course, because that's what Sith Lords do. They want to dismantle the Republic and build an empire. That's a classic Star Wars thing. And we have the Imperial Knights, who are sort of, in this book, they're not Jedi and they're not Sith. They're neutral. They use both sides of the Force and sort of ride the fence. And this neutrality sort of created this stagnant society. And there's, no enemies to fight against, and, everyone gets lazy because of that, sort of. So when the Sith Lord shows up, everybody's up in arms. They don't really know what to do, because the Sith have not existed in the galaxy for a very long time at this point. And Gabriel Hardman and Pacheco did this very simple thing with the Sith Lords and how they're being presented in this time in the Star Wars universe that is so simple that I can't believe no one's ever done it before, but it makes the Sith a little bit more scary and a little bit harder to beat, but at the same time, it's really interesting. I don't want to spoil exactly what it is, because it sort of happens towards the end of the book, and it says a lot about the character that we're going to be seeing, the main villain in this, the Sith Lord. So I won't spoil it, but it just has to do with that rule of two thing that we had in the prequels, and then in the it's not said in the original films, but how there's two Sith Lords, the Master and the Apprentice sort of thing. There's a different spin on that, and it's not just having a bunch of Sith Lords like the Jedi do, like it's been done everywhere else when we do Sith Lords. It's not the rule of two thing. It's a different thing. So it's very cool. I'm liking all that stuff, and then there's this interesting thing with Ania Solo, who's the main character guiding us through all this. where she has to sort of make the sort of choices where Han Solo does, where she's saying, you know, I'm a junkyard worker, I'm not worthy of taking on a task and a destiny that's this grandiose for myself. I don't consider myself to be that important. And people tell her that, you know, Han Solo, you know, in this world, people build him up to be this great hero, and a lot of people don't know that he was a criminal and a smuggler before he did all of the things in this world, because they sort of lionized him later on for all the things that he did. So it's interesting to see her have to deal with her heritage in that way, and look at the way Han Solo is viewed in the galaxy now as a hero and stuff. So yeah, this is just really interesting Star Wars stuff. It's stuff we've never seen before, but at the same time very classic, playing to those archetypes and all the stuff you love about Star Wars. So I'd highly recommend this one. This is probably the best Star Wars book that Dark Horse is doing.
Sounds great.
Yeah, it's really awesome.
Dan, it's time now for Book of the Week. And I'll pick first this time. I'm between two. And I think I'm ultimately going to have to, and I've done this before, but I think ultimately I'm going to have to go with Dark Knight 22.
Yeah, that sounded really interesting, and I don't blame you for picking that. Let's see. I think I'm ultimately going to have to go with Uncanny Avengers number 10. This was the one that I probably got the most thought-provoking dialogue with the story, I suppose. I thought a lot about what was being said in this. I enjoyed all the character dynamics, and it's really, really heavy emotional stuff. So, yeah, Remender's the man.
I will say, and I'm surprised at myself for saying this, that the two I was between were both DC books, and the other one was Justice League Dark. I was actually really impressed with it. So
that's awesome. Yeah, if that ends as well as you've been saying it's been going so far, I'm definitely going to check that out when it finishes. I was just sort of a little bit weary of buying it in issues because, I don't know, I hold a skepticism towards everything DC now, just naturally. I
still do,
and,
too.
Just because there's so many good things coming out, I have to be careful about what I buy, and especially with events like that. But yeah, that sounds like a great story, and I like Jeff Johns when he's you know, doing his good work.
Yeah, and pairing him up with Lemire is really a good idea.
Oh yeah, definitely. Hopefully
he's great too.
If that goes well, it would be interesting to see him, Snyder, and Lemire work on something together, co-plot an event.
That's a great point, and also Lemire suddenly getting to do something that high profile. It's going to be cool to see where his career is going to go. Yeah,
definitely, because I wouldn't have expected him initially to be like a big DC writer necessarily, like one of their big company guys, because he started out as such a Vertigo independent sort of guy, drawing and writing his own stuff.
Right.
But it's interesting. Hopefully, I wish him the best though.
Yeah, he's got a real big writer career going on right now. I'm not sure anybody would have expected that.
Yeah, me either. Yeah, it's impressive the level of talent that both the companies have working for them right now. I think. I mean, Marvel more so than DC, obviously, in the terms of the ratio of great creators on books. But DC has some pretty good talent going on for them right now, especially people that are up and coming, like that guy that was working on Thunderbolts for Marvel. He's doing Swamp Thing, and supposedly it's better than Snyder, and I wouldn't doubt it because his Thunderbolt stuff is fantastic. So
I feel like DC is maybe mellowing a little bit. I'd like to think that. I mean, I know that there still have been some pretty recent writers and artists leaving there, but at least we've got more creators that have stayed on books longer now, and there's a little more established talent there that I guess are happy enough that they're still there. So I like to think that they're mellowing out over there a little bit, and that things are stabilizing to a degree where we don't have to keep changing teams every 3 issues.
That would be nice. I would hope so too, because DC has such a great stable of characters. I don't want to see them mishandled, obviously. I want the books to be good.
Well, everybody, thanks as always for watching us review new comics, and we'll have another show for you next week with new acquisitions. And as always, I want to once again thank Elite Comics for helping us out with the show. Dan, thanks for being with me. Thanks for being at my computer as always. Sure appreciate it.
Oh, no problem. Thanks for having me as always. I had a great time, and I think we've got a pretty good week coming up next week too. This was a big week for me. It seems like all of them are big weeks now, but
yeah, it's
the summer is just crazy for comics. They release everything. all the time.
I thought, I announced this last week. I guess I read it wrong. I thought we were supposed to get Guardians of the Galaxy this week. We didn't. I'm still like really stoked to see what is done with Angela in that book, and I thought we were going to get it this week, and we didn't. So I looked it up. It was not this week like I thought it was. So.
Oh, and I wanted to mention before we go too. I forgot to mention this at the beginning of the show. I was supposed to review Scarlet Spider number 19 this week. It did come out, but my store was sold out. Weirdly enough, that's not a book I would expect to really sell out, because I think I'm one of the only people that reads it, but I will try to get my hands on a copy for next week, and I will be on the show for next week.
You know what happened? They buy one, and you usually get it, and somebody else bought it that time.
I wouldn't doubt it.
Thanks, everybody, for watching. We sure appreciate it. I'm Captain Logan.
And I'm Dan.
And we'll see you next week.